And he has video of Mary killing Esther. Okay, so this episode opens with Karen and Pete meeting for the first time. He scheduled a visit with her, and of course she's trying to figure out who he is and why he's there.
Karen, I'm Pete Guillory. I'm very glad you agreed to meet me.
And he, introduced himself, and he's a psychiatrist, and he's claiming that he works for the FBI, and they are trying to figure out if she's a match for witness protection. They feel like, this is what he's saying to her, that, she remembers more than she's either claiming, or that, he's trying to help her recover whatever memory she can about Parker. And, of course, she's not trusting. She's, basically saying that, she doesn't want a new life. She wants her old life back. And, she's basically said all that she remember.
I want my old life back. And I've said everything I remember.
So she's now back in her cell, and one of the other prisoners came over, and of course initially pretended like she was all nice and welcoming, and she introduced herself as Louise and how she's next door. And
Karen, Louise, I'm next door.
They started talking, and then she tried to see what Emma was writing. And then her true colors came out. She ends up attacking Karen.
See, we all got daughters on the outside.
And her, two other women came in, and they were saying how they have daughters, and how she could protect this guy who hunts and kills little girls. It's not something that they can tolerate. And
women like you helping out men like him, that makes us sick to our stomachs.
Of course, Karen's like, I don't know anything, and they're going to make her remember in Louise's words, and which I thought was kind of interesting. You're talking about your daughters out there now. Of course, we don't know why they're in prison, but we do know that they're in prison, and you're away from your kid. So I thought that was a bit much. I mean, y'all all locked up, so whatever you did was more important than being with your kid. I'm assuming that's how you felt at the time, but now you're attacking old Karen / Emma because of her attachment to this guy who is a serial killer. But we're gonna move on. So after being attacked, the next thing you see, she's on the phone with Pete, basically saying that she's ready to cooperate.
Hello?
It's Karen. I've changed my mind.
So back in the present day, the first thing she had to, I don't know, it doesn't give a time frame, she is having her locks changed. And, which I thought was odd, but the man who was changing her locks was asking her, why was she changing her locks? And she said that, she's just, she's a single woman who's living alone, and she just wants to feel safe.
Something happened out here, miss?
I live alone. I want to feel safe.
And then she ends up having a flashback. There's some fair or something going on. And she walks over to the van where Parker is. He's doing this tattoo on this young lady who is not moving at this point. And she's telling him about this cotton candy and how they're giving this cotton candy away.
Okay, they've got cotton candy. Clouds of it, and they're just giving it away.
And he's, busy. And so he told her that, she could go and get some for them. And so she was hesitant to go, but she did. Okay, so the next thing, you see an article that was penned by Kamala, basically saying how Mary Barlow used her grief against her. And Mary ends up calling Jake in and saying, have you seen, the website, and have you seen this thread? And he basically tells his mom, like, you're the reason for this. You took something that was private to her and you made it public, and there's no way that you can apologize for that.
You stole a recording that was so private and so personal, and you shared it with everyone.
And Mary is still like, well, no, I just can't. So eventually he ended up having to stop her because she jumped up like she was going to run out. And he said, Mom, you need to stop and you need to take a break. And especially from this Karen Miller, quest that you're on. At this point, he just wanted her to stop.
Take a break from all of it, but especially from Karen Miller.
So there was this brief scene of John. I'm assuming it's the next day, because if you remember in the previous episode, it was late. They were trying to get her to bed, and she wasn't really in the right state of mind, so they did tell him to come back. So I'm assuming it's the next day. He's there talking to Esther, who's Emma's, Karen's adoptive mom. And, she started, some conversation
initially.
And then she mentioned some stones. And I think it was after he asked if Karen had been in contact. And then she made mentions of some stones and asking if she still has her stones, and how, she goes to the lake to throw her stones, which I guess represents her sins, how she throws her sins away. And
when it gets to be too much and she needs to throw those sins away.
And she ends up saying, people are after her. And so John ends up saying, well, that's why we need to find her first. So at the salon, they're throwing a party for Georgia, who is pregnant. I'm assuming at this point she is about to go out on maternity leave. And so they wanted to do something nice for her. So, of course, Georgia is thanking him. She's giving her speech. And Emma's phone goes off. And, of course, it's Pete sending her a text telling her that she needs to call him right now.
My baby, but it never felt like alone because y'all never left me.
So, of course, she ignored the text. And after Georgia gave her speech, she went on to help one of her clients. And her client said something really weird to her about she's able to read her aura, and how she was, how she's been many people. And of course, Emma is like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, maybe it's not your aura. Maybe I'm seeing other people.
I sense other lives. You've been many others before you.
And eventually, Pete sends her another text, basically saying that he wants to talk to her right now. So she ends up going outside. He was outside. And she's telling him that she's at work and what the big deal is. And of course, he's confronting her because she changed the locks.
This is my work. I'm trying to build a life here.
Why'd you change the locks?
And she was basically she told him that she know that he worked at the group home, and how the records were sealed. And he starts going into how he worked there when he was 20 years old, and his records are sealed because he works for the federal government and all this other claptrap, right?
I work with the federal government. I have been vetted through and through. If there was anything shady about my background, I wouldn't be able to do this job.
Which, I always thought was odd, because usually if somebody's in witness protection, their handler is an officer, a U.S. Marshal, not a psychiatrist. So, on one hand, you would think that Emma/Karen would be a lot more savvy. Like, this doesn't even make any sense. But he's still, going on how and that's why, his records are sealed, because he works for the federal government, and how, at any point in time she could ask for somebody new, which obviously we're saying to me sitting here looking at the episode like, well, that's what I would have did. But she was like, well, I don't want or she she could always leave or start over somewhere else. And she was like, I don't want to start over, I just want a new person, right? And he was like, well, that's his cabin. So now she's finding out that that's actually his home. He owns that property. So, of course, she's looking at him like, what are you talking about? He was like, well, you said you wanted someplace safe. And she was like, yeah, I wanted a place of my own. And he basically told her that, she wanted to play Nancy Drew, and she wanted to keep on investigating. She could do that if she doesn't trust him. But, it's completely up to her. And, they basically parted ways like that. So in the next scene, we see Mary. She's on the phone. She's calling, I'm assuming at this point, leaving a message for Jake, letting him know that, you know, she's taking his advice and she's taking some time off and that she's going to be out of town for a few days. She's just going to probably go to a spa and just to go someplace to unwind and relax.
I think I'm going to take off for a few days to a spa. You know, unplug, get some headspace.
So Emma's back at the cabin. And of course she, you know, she walks in and she's the kind of like surveying the place. Now she knows that's his home. And she, while she's kind of surveying, you know, her surroundings, she has another flashback and she goes back to the fair where she went to get the cotton candy. And she had a feeling, you could see her mood, she was all smiles. I mean, people are all around her dancing, seem like they're having a good time. And she's all smiles and all of a sudden her demeanor changed. And there was like this urgency to get back to the van. And so she got back to the van where he does his tattooing. That's where he works. And he's talking to the girl. So she was aroused. He's basically talking to her and gave his card and the whole thing. So she was fine.
I'm getting a discomfort, call me.
And so you can kind of see this relief on her face, like almost like she knew something. And so he ends up taking a bite of her cotton candy, and you know they laughed at, you know, they laughed and had a good time after that. So we flash to Minnesota, and of course we knew that Mary was going to Minnesota. So, of course, at this point, John had already called her and told her that he found Esther, the adoptive mom, and she decided that this would be a time for her to go, and she wanted to talk to Esther. So, they're in the mall, actually, at this point. This is John and Mary, and she's saying how she wants to go with him. And, of course, he's saying, well, no, he doesn't want her to go because that's not how he works. He works a certain way, and how the devil is in the details, and he doesn't, you know, he needs to work at his own pace. And, you know, she was basically like, you know, I don't want to be that asshole boss, but I'm going.
I don't want to be that asshole boss who micromanages.
I'm so pleased.
But I'm going with you.
So, I guess she's going with him when he goes back. So, Emma ends up going to talk to Tom, and she wanted to know how she can get the records unsealed. So, she's not dropping this. She thinks, you know, there's more to what's going on with Pete. And Tom's letting her know that, you know, the only way to do that is with a court order, which you're never going to get. And he was talking to her like, I don't understand. You know, he's like, so why can't you leave? And she was like, well, you know, I have a lease. I can't just leave. He was like, well, if you feel unsafe, if the, you know, the person who owns the property is making you feel unsafe, then you have every right to leave. And then he starts, you know, saying, you know, but, you know, unless... You know, there's something else going on. You know, a woman from Seattle, because he knew she was from Seattle from when she went to apply for the job, ends up meeting a psychiatrist in Louisiana and renting property from him.
Then I start to wonder how you, in Seattle, come across a psychiatrist in North Louisiana.
And, you know, he's telling her how she could trust him and how she could talk to him and tell him anything. And then he moved in, you know, to kiss her. And then she has this brief flashback of her and Parker, you know, them having some intimate moments.
You should let me know if you like me.
And that's, you know, pretty much where it ends. She left before things could progress further. So now Mary and John are on their way to speak with Esther. They go into the room, and she is having one of her episodes. She's talking about wolves again and how they got to keep the wolves out. And
There's a wolf. There's a wolf.
Mary is like, is there something you neglected to tell me? And then he ends up telling her that, you know, she does have early, you know, onset dementia, but she does have times of clarity and how he's able to reach her, right? But the nurse is standing next to Esther, and Esther is basically saying that I don't know these people and I want them gone, I want them out.
From Florida? Get them out. Get them away from me. I don't want to see the girls from school.
And so they end up leaving, so they didn't get anything from that visit. So Emma ends up going to the group home. But Diana is there, and they're all rehearsing for this festival that Rose is supposed to be queen of or princess of or whatever the case may be. So they're all dancing and she's teaching them, I guess, how to waltz or something.
It's a sliding step. A sliding step. You should feel like water.
So she ends up holding the window, and Jay came to the window, and so he ends up letting her in, and they go back to Jess's room, and she's kind of going through some of the stuff that was left behind, and you know, she ends up showing him a photo that she found of Pete and this woman that she found in the cabin. And before he could even really respond, they could hear someone coming down the hall. And so it was one of the women that worked there asking him why he wasn't at the dance. And so, of course, he ended up having to leave. So we flash to Rose. Rose, her and her date ended up going outside. And he, you know, ends up telling her how, you know, he likes her, or he's always wanted to be with her, and you know, talking about some sexual stuff.
Want some time alone with you. I wake up at night and I'm so hard.
And as he's talking, she could see Emma coming out of the building. They saw each other, and Emma went around the building, went around the house. So Rose was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's good." So she ends up taking his joint that he had behind his ear, and she ends up meeting up with Emma and was like, "Do you want to get high? You want to smoke something? You know?"
Do you want to get high?
So we flash to Mary and John. So John is has been escorted to his table with Mary. And it was odd to me that Mary could get in bed with the devil and then be shocked at the tactics of the devil. Like, that's the sole reason why you hired him, right? So he sat down at the table, and she said, "Well, that's, you know, kind of weird. You know, I never told you I never gave you my details as far as where she was staying." And he ends up telling her, "Well, I'd be bad at my job if you had to." And she's sitting across from me looking all concerned and confused. I'm like, "Bitch, what did you think what was going on? You got in bed with a predator."
I didn't give you my hotel details.
I'd be pretty poor at my job if you needed to.
So then they started talking, and he started talking a little bit about how dementia works, and she's saying that she already knows that because her mother had it, and just making small talk. Like, she asked me if he had any more family, and he says yes, I have a sister named Jane. Of course, that was off-putting because she was like, "Wait a minute, John and Jane?" And he was like, "Yeah, I know, that's what they name, you know, unclaimed, unidentified bodies." So of course that made her nervous, and then he ends up saying to her that, "I need you to let me do my job." And he raised his voice a little bit and kind of got her concerned, like, why he talking to me like that?
To let me do my work. This afternoon was very unusual.
He's basically saying that he has, like he said, he was trying to tell her earlier before they went to the hospital, that he has his own method, he has his own way of doing things, and he doesn't, and how she has this energy about her, and that maybe it was that energy that set Esther off. And so, of course, she was like, "Well, of course I have an energy. I'm angry, and I don't want that anger to go away." And she started going into this whole thing. And he ends up telling her that he has a connection with Esther. Esther thinks that he is her husband. That he died. He started talking about it, you know, her husband, how he died when he was 50. He's like, they really didn't have a whole lot of time together. And he was an engineer. He was a remarkable man, and he basically saying that they don't need a third person in their relationship, and that he doesn't want her to go with him tomorrow.
We don't need just 3 people in this marriage, Mary. I don't want you there tomorrow.
And basically that's where they parted ways. So Emma and Rose, I guess they went on and smoked the little joint, and you know, they're kind of in a good mood. And she, you know, Emma I think it was Rose that asked her, you know, why she was there, and of course Emma was like, "Well, why? What's wrong with being here?" And I would think that, you know, you would be happy being like May Queen or something. I can't remember the name of that. That's going on. And she's, you know, started telling her that, you know, my mom locks me in the room to keep me safe.
Every night my mom locks me in my bedroom to keep me safe from the world.
And then she basically drags me out to stand on the stage so the whole town can see me, I guess, and be in awe of her or something to that effect.
And every day she gets me ready for a stage that everybody in town can watch me on.
And Emma ends up letting it slip that something bad happened there. And of course, Rose is like, what are you talking about? And so she kind of cut the conversation short and told her that she needed to go home and that her mom was right and that it's not safe.
Rose.
What are you talking about? What's happened?
She's right. Your mom, it isn't safe here. It isn't a good place.
And she just basically reiterated, you need to go home. So this next scene, it's like two scenes in one that's like flashing back between the two. So Emma makes it home and she goes back to the shed and she found this book that she starts looking through, and then she starts looking at the wall, and almost like that place was familiar to her. And then she heard a noise, and so she goes to peek out, the shed to see what was going on, and then she saw the light come on in her house. So you can only imagine she's thinking, okay, Pete that had a key made and he's up in the house again. Okay, so after that little situation with John, Mary decided that she wasn't going to wait until the following day during visiting hours. She decided she was going to go straight to the home, and so that's what she did. So she went in, and they apparently have lax security. So she was able to walk right in, go right to Esther's room, and they started talking. And initially, Esther thought that Mary was her friend, Linda. But Mary was like, she started apologizing for John and how she invited him into her life and how he's a dangerous man. And
I'm so sorry I brought him into your life.
And Esther started going into how they wanted her to rot. I'm assuming she's referring to Karen, and how she's a fighter and how she's going to flourish.
They wanted her to rot. But I know she's growing. I know she's flourishing.
And of course, Mary's like, what are you talking about? And so it's like I said, it's flashing back and forth. So Emma makes it up to the house, and it's the locksmith along with another man. And the other guy was saying, this is my daughter's cat.
That's my little girl's kid.
I recognize it.
If you remember in the first episode, there was this flyer up for this lost cat. And so the locksmith is saying that when he was there earlier, he noticed the cat. And I'm thinking to myself, so you had a key made. This is after she'd already changed the locks. You the one that had a key made, went into her house with another man to get this cat. So of course she is livid. She got this hammer in her hand, and she's basically telling them to get out of her house. So we flash back to Esther and Mary, and Esther's talking about how there are wolves out there, and how basically, Esther, she ain't nowhere near as out of it as people think. She saw Mary for who she was. She was like, you sent wolves after me. I know that you sent him, but I survived him. And
you think I don't know wolves? You sent your wolf, but I survived him.
And she's going to survive you, and talking about Karen's going to survive Mary,
and she'll survive you.
And how she'll never find her, and
you'll never find her. They keep her safe because of people like you.
It was a lot. So again, it's flashing back to Emma, and she's telling them to get out. At this point, she done busted up the counter, or whatever, the glass, whatever was on the counter, and they made their way out.
Get out! Get out! Get out! Get out!
And so Esther was about to call for help, and Mary ended up moving the call button so she couldn't get to it, and then she saying that she needed some water. So Mary ended up getting her a cup of water, and she basically said that Emma told her that Karen how she was never going to find her, and the only way that she would ever come back is if something happened to her, is to kiss her coffin. So she's basically telling Mary that the only way that Emma or Karen is going to come back is after to pay her respects to her. So she went to get the water, and you saw Esther about to get out of the bed, and she's telling Esther, you need to get back in the bed. And she was like, no, I know there are laws against this. This is out of visiting hours. And she's ready to go and, get an orderly, somebody to let them know that she's there. And next you know, this is whole tussle, and she's trying to keep Esther quiet.
Please stop it. Stop it.
So there was another brief flash of Emma back at the house. This after they left. She's covered in sweat because she was just enraged that these people was in her house. And then she had this brief flashback of her running through the woods, and there's blood on her hands. I don't know if she cut her hand at some point, but there's blood on her hands. So then we go to another flashback, and this is Pete and Karen when he went to see her in prison. And there was these photos. There were like 4 photos in front of her, and he was asking her if she recognized any of the people in the photos.
Do you recognize any of these girls?
And she reluctantly pointed out Teresa, and she was like, she remember her because there was some kind of music festival going on, and she had gotten a tattoo. She was in Kid's Van, and she got a tattoo. So was that Teresa that got the tattoo? Excuse me, I don't remember. Anywho, but there was something else that was curious about that whole photo array. After Emma came home from work and she went through, she was surveying the cabin, and she started going through things, I guess, to find whatever. She ended up finding this photo of Pete and this unidentified woman, and this was the same photo she showed Jay. And so when I saw one of the photos in the lineup, I'm like, this looks like the woman that was in the photo with him. So I could be wrong, but that looks like the same woman. So we come back to the present, and you hear Pete is listening to voice messages. So he has some app or something that's allowing him to, I want to say intercept her voicemails, but he's able to listen to her voicemails. And so Tom had left a number of voicemails after, their encounter, and he's just trying to talk to her to find out, what's going on. So while that was going on, his wife Lisa came in and started asking about her file, because remember, Lisa used to be one of his patients. And so he's asking her, well, why? Of course, I have your file. Why do you want to know? And she said, I want to see it. I want to know what you thought of me before you fell in love with me.
I don't know what happened back then, but can you call me?
Do you still have a file on me?
And so, of course, he kind of smooths the conversation, and I don't know, maybe they had themselves a little entanglement. I don't know how the whole situation ended. So Emma ends up calling Esther, and John answered the phone and basically said that Esther had passed away.
I'm sorry. Esther passed away last night.
So, of course, she is devastated. So, at this point, she has decided she needs to go and do what she needs to do. So, she calls on Rosa, and they decided they're going to take Rosa's father's car. She was like, he's not even going to notice it gone. But she was like, I bet he's going to realize that you're gone.
My dad won't even notice it's gone.
Yeah, well, he's going to notice that you're gone.
Because Rosa is going with Emma. And she was asking if she had any money, and she was like, I have $400 in cash, but I also have my debit card. And of course, Emma's like, well, we can't use the debit card on the road because they'll be able to track us. And then Rose was like, oh, well, my dad keeps his stash in the office. So Rose went up to get to the office to get the stash. And Emma, she waited for a minute, but then she ends up jumping in the car and cranking the car up. So at this point, it's like, did she leave her? Did Rose, did she wait for her? We don't know. That's basically how that scene ended. So the coup de grace is the final scene where John, he had this photo. There was a photo in Esther's room of her and her husband on their wedding day. It was her in her wedding gown and the whole thing. And so he was kind of sentimental. Like, he kind of felt some kind of way about Esther. And so you realize when he took the back off the photo, he had placed a camera in the photo, behind the photo. So he got the little card and he put it in this drive, USB thing. And he has video of Mary killing Esther. Because remember, her whole mission in life at this point is to get to Karen. And when Esther told her the only way that Karen would come back is to kiss her coffin, she pretty much sealed her fate. And so he now has a video of Mary killing Esther. And so now you got this psychopath with leverage on you, but she ain't no more. She just as, I don't know. I don't want to say she's just as crazy as John. I don't know if her crazy can match John's, but I can imagine that things are going to get really bad for her, because I do think that in some weird way John had some affinity for Esther, and that's going to be problematic. That's problematic for him. So I'm going to end this here, and I'll see you guys in the next video.